The American story.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God?
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
We have an obligation to work on behalf of the next generation. Today, I say to you that the challenges we face are real. They are serious and they are many. Yes, we can. Thank you, New Hampshire.
Olá, bem-vindos, boa noite. Exatos 4 anos depois de sua despedida de 8 anos como o homem mais poderoso do mundo, o ex-presidente dos Estados Unidos, Barack Obama, lança suas memórias. Uma Terra Prometida. Barack Obama é um escritor dos bons. Já o era antes de traçar sua fulminante carreira política. Escreve bem e muito. O livro tem 751 páginas. E este é só o primeiro volume de sua autobiografia. No livro, que é de leitura fácil e envolvente, nós conhecemos em detalhes a enorme presença feminina na formação do homem. A avó notável, a mãe extraordinária, a esposa arretadíssima, mulheres poderosas, como a compensar a falta de um pai que o abandonou. Na narrativa, a gente pode saber um pouco mais sobre o estadista, o comandante-chefe, o orador excepcional, mas a grande revelação do livro talvez seja a franca exposição da intimidade de um homem, com suas inseguranças, dúvidas, angústias. Um homem que depende fisicamente de sua família e que tenta conciliar essa dependência, essa fragilidade mesmo, com suas enormes ambições políticas. Enormes mesmo, maiores que ele. Michelle é quem melhor explica Barack, tocando na ferida como só a companheira poderia. Ela diz para ele: parece que você tem um vazio a preencher. Uma Terra Prometida poderia estar sendo lançado após uma nada improvável vitória de Donald Trump nas eleições americanas. Mas não, quem conquistou o direito e o dever de morar na Casa Branca nos próximos 4 anos foi o vice de Obama, seu parceiro de bromance, Joe Biden. Durante o governo Obama, a sintonia entre os dois consagrou-se nessa expressão brincalhona, bromance, romance entre brothers. Podem traduzir sem susto para amizade. A vitória de Joe Biden parece ser mais uma ocasião na biografia de Obama em que a sorte sorri para ele com todos os dentes. Como outro dia, quando numa rápida passagem por uma quadra de basquete, chutou uma bola de 3... Ele é canhoto. Chutou uma bola de 3 pontos sem aquecimento ou preparo nenhum. E caiu de chuá. That's what I do! Barack Obama falou conosco da suíte de um hotel em Washington. Nossa conversa foi gravada no fim da tarde de domingo, no horário de Washington, começo da noite aqui no Brasil. Hi!
Pedro, how are you?
I'm fine. Tudo bem, senhor Obama?
It's so nice to see you, and thank you for having me.
We are very glad to have this opportunity. You know, after reading your book, we feel some close to you, a kind of intimacy. I'm almost greeting you as Shaquille O'Neal did in the grandstands in the finals of NBA Finals. Remember how it was?
I do.
Hey, Prez!
I actually signed up to be a pole vaulter this year.
I hear I'm sitting next to Shaq.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What's up, Fred?
Hey, Prez, that's right. You know, listen, Brazil has some good basketball.
Yeah, we used to. Now we have good players, but not a good team.
Yeah, but, you know, I know it's never going to be the same as football, but there were some great players coming out of Brazil.
We have a talent. Listen, I believe the key to understand your biography, your memories, can be found in what Michelle tells you in a plain way. I assume it's her way of saying things. At the beginning of your marriage, it's like you have a hole to fill. 751 pages of words were meant to fill which personal voids?
Well, you know, I think, as I say in the preface of the book, that this book serves a number of different roles. On the one hand, it's a history of my presidency, and it was a very eventful time. Obviously, just the first 2 years that I was in office, I was dealing with the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, a global crisis that affected everybody, including Brazil, a war in Iraq, a war in Afghanistan. You had terrorist issues, you had environmental crises. So I wanted to make sure that people understood those issues. But it also is a personal story of someone who was inspired by the civil rights movement here in the United States, who decided to go into public service, and I think represents the education of a young man as he proceeds to the highest office in the land. And finally, I think it also, I hope, will serve as an inspiration for young people in the United States, in Brazil, and around the world to get involved and understand that they too can have an impact in the life of their country and the life of the world.
Yeah, that's true. Because a part of the statesman, the commander-in-chief, the great speech writer, and all, there's a lot of revelations about yourself as a person. You mentioned inspiration. When you were in Brazil in 2011, you went to the favela called Cidade de Deus, City of God, right. And you managed to persuade security to allow you to go and greet the hundreds of people, but mainly kids, black, brown kids. Most of them, they live in fatherless families, more than 50%. And your advisor, Valerie Jarrett, told you then, I'll bet that we've changed the lives of some of those kids forever. And you said that at the time you questioned yourself if that was really true. Do you have an answer for that now, today?
I think that the United States and Brazil are very similar. We are the two largest countries in the hemisphere, two democracies that have a history that is based on slavery and racial discrimination. And, both of our countries, I think, have struggled with how to overcome the inequalities and injustices of the past and look towards the future. And so when I was in the favela, I very much felt a kinship and an understanding of many of those children that I saw, because they reminded me of children in Chicago, my hometown, or in Washington, D.C., where I'm speaking from now. And I do think that the symbolic role of my presidency was important. I don't want to diminish that, because I think that when I decided to run, as I describe in the book, one of my reasons for running was because I thought that if, in fact, I won and I was sworn in to the most powerful office, not just in the country, but in the world, that it would send a message that, in fact, any child can aspire to something higher, that their horizons are not capped. And I do think that during my presidency, during those 8 years, oftentimes I've met not just black children or brown children, but white children who are now young adults. And they say, as I was growing up, I just took for granted that why shouldn't there be a black president? And now we've got a woman of black and Asian heritage who's going to be the vice president of the United States. So those things were important, but I never wanted to delude myself that what the children in the favelas outside of Rio or in Chicago or anywhere else in the world they need more than just inspiration. They need good schools. They need jobs when they graduate from school. They need decent housing. They need to be protected from environmental pollution. And I think the point of that scene was for me to emphasize that symbols are important, but concrete policies are also important. And I think I made progress as president during those 8 years in helping many children like that, but there were many that I wasn't able to help, that I didn't touch. And so it's a reminder that there's a lot of work left to be done.
Later in that same day, you went to Corcovado Mountain in Rio. Well, the day before, you had just ordered for the first time the bombing of another country in Libya, and then you were overloaded by work. During dinner with your family, you felt that your daughters were growing and growing away from you.
Right.
Then, facing the huge statue of Christ the Redeemer, your girls flanked you. Sasha grabbed your arm, your hand. Malia slipped an arm around your waist. And that what happened?
Well, then Sasha said, should we pray? Because, as you know, when you, especially at night, when you are standing beneath that landmark, it is powerful. And at the time, by the way, there was fog that had come in and we weren't sure we were going to drive up. So suddenly the mist is parting and there you have, this giant figure of Christ standing before you, glistening white with the beams on. And, the girls, they were very impressed. So they said, maybe we should pray. I said, yes, let's go ahead and pray. And, as I say, part of my prayer was, that my daughters know how much I love them and that our closeness, even if as they grow up, naturally they grow a little bit away from you, that they will always feel that love from their father. And the other prayer I was saying at the time was we were in the middle of a Libya operation that was risky. And I was just praying that nothing went wrong there either. And by the way, there's a photograph in the book that shows us as we are leaving or as we're ascending the steps to see the Christ the Redeemer. And it's one of my favorite pictures. It still hangs in my house. Yeah.
And picture.
Yeah.
Really
And
was Peter Souza?
Yeah, it was Pete Souza, my famous White House photographer.
Yeah, he's great, really great. He served to Reagan before, wasn't he?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's my man right here. Love this guy.
You'll be very good again.
The most popular politician on earth.
Na primeira vez em que Obama menciona no livro o ex-presidente Lula, ele o descreve assim: ex-líder sindical grisalho e cativante, com uma passagem pela prisão por protestar contra o governo militar e eleito em 2002, tinha iniciado uma série de reformas pragmáticas que fizeram as taxas de crescimento do Brasil dispararem, ampliando sua classe média e assegurando moradia e educação para milhões de cidadãos mais pobres. E aí, constava também que tinha os escrúpulos de um chefão do Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall foi uma organização política da cidade de Nova York, comandada por políticos democratas, que dominou a região durante 80 anos, entre a segunda metade do século XIX e a primeira do século XX. Tammany Hall é sinônimo de corrupção e banditismo político. Portanto, é assim que ele completa a sua apresentação de Lula. Constava também que tinha os escrúpulos de um chefão do Tammany Hall e circulavam boatos de clientelismo governamental, negócios por baixo do pano e propinas na casa dos bilhões. Listen, Brazilians remember quite well in 2009 during the G20 meeting you greeted former Brazilian President Lula da Silva, saying that that's my guy right here. I love this guy. That's my man, the most popular politician on earth. In the book, you mention Lula, you acknowledge his social achievements, but you also say that reportedly he was a kind of political mafioso involved in billionaire graft and payback schemes. So there are two political entities, the working class hero and the gang leader. And there's only one man, Lula. So nowadays, would you still call him your man?
Well, I will say that the reports of corruption that arose and then obviously have played out in the Brazilian system, at that time, I was not aware of all of them. And I think that the gift that Lula had in connecting to the Brazilian people and the very real economic progress that was made in lifting people out of poverty during that period, is something that can't be denied. And one of the things that I try to do in the book is to describe the complexities of all these figures. I talk about Putin, and I talk about Merkel, and I talk about Singh of India, and what you come to recognize when you're on the world stage is that most leaders are a reflection of the contradictions and the tensions of their countries. And, there's some that, like a Merkel, who I was very close to and worked for a long time with. There were others like Putin who I ended up having a more adversarial relationship with. But in order to understand any of these leaders, it's important to understand their history, the context in which they're operating, the political constraints that they have to deal with, which is part of the reason why throughout the book I try to provide some historical background to the countries that I'm visiting and the leaders that I'm dealing with, because so often we don't take the time to understand each other across national borders, and oftentimes it's those misunderstandings that lead to conflict and war.
Agora a gente vai incluir na conversa uma pessoa que acompanhou todos os passos de Barack Obama durante 4 anos, os 4 anos do segundo mandato em Washington, e ele não conhece. Quer dizer, ele conheceu uma vez quando ela gritou uma pergunta para ele, quando ele estava passando com a Dilma Rousseff, presidente do Brasil na época, e ele parou para responder para ela. Vai participar de nossa conversa, preparando uma reportagem para o Jornal de Amanhã, a editora executiva do jornal O Globo, Flávia Barbosa. Flávia, I think you know this guy.
How are you, Flavia?
Yeah, a little bit. How are you, Mr. President?
I'm doing very well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having this interview. It's a pleasure to be part of this conversation.
Thank you.
President Trump insists that the election was rigged, keeping polarization at extremely high levels, right, and making it harder for Joe Biden to heal the country, as he promised. So how damaging do you think this is for American democracy, and how do you think should President-elected Biden approach the 70 million Americans that voted for President Trump?
Well, look, there's no doubt that America is deeply divided right now. I think the results of that election are clear. I think the majority of people obviously embraced Joe Biden. There is absolutely no evidence of anything other than a fair, secure election in which the votes were counted, and Joe Biden got almost 5 million more votes in the popular vote and got far more electoral votes than Donald Trump did. But what is also true is that the parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, have very deep differences between them right now, and that it's going to be a challenge to try to create the unity we need for a government to meet big challenges like COVID, like climate change, like dealing with the economic crisis. I think Joe's taken the right steps so far, which is to say that he's going to be the president of all people and not just the people who supported him. I think he will help lower the temperature, and I think he will restore some of the basic norms and traditions and institutional values that both Republicans and Democrats prior to Donald Trump had observed. I'm not surprised that Donald Trump is now violating the custom of a peaceful transition to power because he violated all kinds of norms before that one. The good news is that ultimately it's not going to make any difference. On January 20th, we will have a new president. But what has been lost is this transition period. I relay in the book how, despite all our policy differences, George W. Bush could not have been more gracious in instructing his team, all his agencies, to work with us cooperatively to ensure a smooth transition. And since we were in the middle of crisis at that time, it allowed us really to hit the ground running so that we were able to move quickly on a whole bunch of issues to deal with the financial crisis. If Donald Trump was doing the same thing, then I think it would be easier for President-elect Biden and his team to specifically address the virus, which is surging right now as we enter Christmas. That could save lives. And it's unfortunate that the Trump administration has chosen not to do that so far. But one way or another, come January 20th, we will have a new administration.
So you keep faith in American democracy?
I do. But, as I write in the book, our democracy has been strained. That is not solely as a result of Donald Trump. The stories that I tell about my presidency indicate how some of these trends were already there. The tendency for the Republican Party to object and obstruct even policies that they had previously proposed themselves, if I was the one who was proposing it. The kinds of conspiracy theories and very loose association to truth that you saw in some of the right-wing media and now on social media that allowed first the birther movement within the Republican Party, now assertions by the president that there's been fraud and illegality in an election that even Republican local officials have certified as not having had any significant problems. It's some of these trends are deeply rooted, and it's going to take some time for us to work through them. But at the end of the day, I do have faith in American democracy, in part because I have faith in the young people who I've seen, not just in the United States, but around the world. They are instinctively inclusive. They instinctively believe in equality and justice for people, even if they're not like themselves. They recognize that the free market has to have some regulations that allow poor people to advance, that ensure environmental sustainability. I think the trend lines are good, but it can be a bumpy ride along the way.
Brazil are being torn down, are being ripped down. More carbon is absorbed in that rainforest than every bit of carbon that's emitted in the United States. I would be gathering up and making sure we had the countries of the world coming up with $20 billion, say, here's $20 billion. Stop tearing down the forest. And if you don't, then you're going to have significant economic consequences. What about the
Now, Joe Biden indicated that could list Brazil as a climate outlaw. The Brazilian president reacted with threats of using gunpowder instead of saliva. Biden once called him boldaceiro, which sounds close, but it's far from correct. Which advice would you give first to Bolsonaro And secondly, to your partner in bromance, Joe Biden, to start lowering the tensions?
Well, look, I don't know Brazil's president. I had already left office when he assumed office. And so I don't want to give an opinion on somebody that I haven't met. I will say that based on what I've seen, his policies, similar to Donald Trump's policies, seem to have de-emphasized the science of climate change. And Brazil is obviously a central player in whether or not we're going to be able to arrest the increases in temperatures that could cause global catastrophe. And you know, I was fortunate that whether it was President Lula, Dilma Rousseff, that they both worked with us cooperatively on these issues. And I think Brazil has in the past been a leader on this, and it would be a shame if it stopped being a leader. I think when you look at the pandemic in terms of how Donald Trump has dealt with it and how it's being dealt with in Brazil, there's been a de-emphasis on science, and there are consequences to that. So my hope would be that with a new Biden administration, there's the opportunity to reset the relationship. I do know that Joe Biden is going to emphasize that climate change is real, and both the United States and Brazil have a leadership role to play. I do know that Joe Biden will emphasize the science around COVID-19 is real, and that we have to mobilize not just within each of our own countries, but internationally to try to bring an end to this pandemic. But at the end of the day, the United States and Brazil have so much in common, and the progress that needs to be made, not just in the hemisphere, but around the world, in part is going to be determined by the quality of the relationship between our two countries. And so, look, when I came into office, as I describe in the book, we had a very strained relationship with Russia. Russia had invaded Georgia. The United States had broken off relations in a lot of ways for at least the first 2 years, partly because President Medvedev was in power. We were able actually to negotiate reductions in nuclear weapons. We were able to cooperate on a wide range of issues. When Putin came back into power, those relationships became strained again. But it indicates that even when you're starting off a relationship where the countries have appeared at odds or there are differences between leaders, that it's still possible to create a constructive relationship, and I hope that's what happens this time.
Well, you mentioned Michelle, and you have been influenced by fantastic women your entire life.
That is true.
And your party has been shaken by very powerful female voices recently, including Kamala Harris, the vice president elected.
But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.
I'm thinking you're very used to girl power, right? Are we close, any close, to having Madam President at the White House, do you think? And would it be a last name Harris, or could it be a last name Obama?
Well, it definitely won't be a last name Obama. Michelle will not run.
No, okay.
That I promise, and I think she's brainwashed the girls into not wanting to be involved in politics at all. They've seen too much, but I think we're very close. Look, we have somebody right down the hall in Kamala Harris. Once she's sworn in, she's going to be, a few steps away from the Oval Office, and she's an extraordinary, talented person. I think that in some ways, resistance to women in political leadership has been just as powerful as resistance to people of color in these highest offices. It's deeply rooted in our cultures, not just U.S. culture or Brazilian culture, but around the globe. Women still suffer from discrimination. They still are oftentimes excluded from the table of power. There are countries in which girls are still not getting the kind of educational opportunity or employment opportunities that they deserve, and are still subject to domestic violence and abuse. And so the work of empowering women is ongoing. And as I've said before, it was interesting as president, I would observe those countries that repress their women, that don't use women's talents, tend to be the countries that do not develop economically and that have other problems. And the countries that oftentimes do well and are able to harness the full potential of that country, in part is because they recognize if we don't get girls and women, half of the population involved in solving our problems and creating businesses and finding cures for new diseases. If we're not training half the population, it'd be like a football team that leaves half the team off the field. You're going to lose. So I hope that Kamala Harris is just the beginning of a process in which more and more women around the world are seen as viable leaders at the highest levels. And it's been interesting. I think some have observed that right now the countries that have women leaders in New Zealand and Germany are doing some of the best job in handling the coronavirus. I don't think that's entirely an accident.
A gente vai fazer rápido intervalo comercial e volta com mais Barack Obama em instantes.
No meu consultório eu tenho visto muitos pacientes relatando tanto sensibilidade como sangramento gengival. Eu sempre recomendo a Sensodina sensibilidade de gengivas. Ela realmente consegue trazer um duplo alívio. É maravilhoso.
Atividade física é pra já. Praticar exercício só faz bem. Seja na escada do prédio, na sala de casa, ao ar livre ou onde for. Diminui o estresse, melhora a autoestima, ajuda a prevenir doenças e melhora a qualidade de vida. Tudo isso nos ajuda a viver mais e melhor. Não deixe a vida para depois. A vida é pra já. Viva um presente com mais futuro. Tá na Globo.
Oferecimento Bradesco Seguros. Segurança e tranquilidade para a sua residência.
Tem pra quem é doido por ofertas, pra quem é doido por óculos e compara preços, pra quem compara óculos e é doido por preço baixo, pra quem ama óculos e preços doidos. Best Friday na Óticas Carol é uma Carol pra cada bolso. Aproveite!
O meu pai foi assassinado. Eu quero tudo parado. Até eu descobrir quem matou meu pai.
Houve um tempo em que não ousariam encostar nessa família.
O próprio Sean Wallace me chamou pelo nome e pediu pra eu achar o cara que matou o pai dele.
Nós estamos transformando parceiros em inimigos. Temos que encontrar uma solução pacífica.
Eu não tô nem um pouco interessado em paz.
No PagBank é assim. Quem precisa de Pag, paga contas no cartão de crédito em até 12 vezes. Quem precisa de Bank, tem cartão internacional grátis com limite de até R$100. Com o Pag, transferências grátis e ilimitadas. Com o Bank, CDB que rende o dobro da poupança, 170% do CDI. O Pag tem recarga de celular grátis. E o Bank tem um radar de ofertas com muitos descontos. Para você ter o Pag e o Bank juntos, vem pro PagBank, o banco completo e grátis. Baixe já o Super App e abra sua conta agora.
O sabor do malte Monique. A refrescância do malte Pilsner. Em uma combinação surpreendente. Uma puro malte saborosa e cremosa. Muito cremosa. Cervejaria Brahma apresenta Brahma Duplo Malte. Beba com moderação.
Eu não tenho mais nada pra vestir.
É a Shopee, pipi, 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 compre aqui, kiki, na Shopee, na Shopee. Compre online.
Shopee com frete grátis em todas as compras.
Vai, que a criatividade vai vencer. Vai.
A Amanda ativou o empreendedorismo, investiu no delivery e deu uma nova cara pro seu negócio. Com receitas familiares, a Amanda trouxe para São Paulo a culinária típica do Acre, onde nasceu. Por conta da pandemia, seu restaurante ficou fechado por mais de 100 dias e ela teve que ativar a criatividade para levar o seu tempero e a sua marca até a casa das pessoas. Além do sabor, Amanda percebeu como a aparência era importante. Afinal, os clientes também comem com os olhos, né? Por isso, ela investiu numa identidade visual diferenciada, inspirada nas cores e padrões da tribo Axaninca do Acre. Ela caprichou nas embalagens e investiu no delivery de pratos, produtos típicos e brindes para os clientes, como uma máscara feita de borracha da Amazônia. Vamos ativar o empreendedorismo e a criatividade. Dicas, informações, inspirações e oportunidades para quem quer empreender. Vai, dá pra fazer. Tá na Globo.
Oferecimento Bradesco. Receba, pague e transfira num Pix.
Patroas, já nos aplicativos de música.
Em todos os momentos do seu dia, conte com a nossa companhia para se informar e se divertir. A gente vive junto. Grupo RBS.
Daqui a pouco, depois de conversa cordial, a lista no Corujão.
Bem-vindos de volta à nossa conversa com o ex-presidente dos Estados Unidos, Barack Obama, que está lançando o seu primeiro volume do seu livro de memórias, Uma Terra Prometida. E quem está com a gente também, a editora executiva do jornal O Globo, Flávia Barbosa.
In your book, you mentioned that Republicans engaged in racial politics to make opposition to your administration. Nevertheless, you never took race to the center stage of your presidency. Were you surprised that racism could resonate that way in sectors of American society? And would you react to it today differently?
I wasn't surprised. I mean, I was never of the belief that because I got elected, we were in a post-racial America. Look, you think about Brazil's racial history, and America, similarly, cannot undo hundreds of years of history just in one election. I think we have made progress. I think we have gotten better. But those old tribal instincts are still there. The legacy of slavery, the legacy of separation and Jim Crow exerts a shadow over today. You see it in the economy. You see it in corporate boardrooms. You see it in our politics. And so none of that surprised me. I think that, you know, as I wrote the book, I had to ask myself sometimes, should I have been more blunt, more forthright in saying, you know what, why is it that you are reacting to me in a particular way that you haven't reacted when it came to previous presidents. At the end of the day, though, as I write in the book, when you're elected to lead a country, the one thing that generally voters don't want to hear is your complaints, right? Because whatever it is that you're going through is not as tough as what many of them are going through. They may be losing their job or losing their house or trying to figure out, how to provide care for their sick child. And they don't want to hear somebody who's flying in Air Force One and living in the White House saying, oh, why are people being mean to me? So, I think that there have been occasions and moments during the election. For example, I gave a speech on race at a time when my pastor at the time, Jeremiah Wright, had said some very inflammatory statements, and it was a crisis for our campaign. I described how I, took the chance of giving a fairly detailed and lengthy discussion of race to the American people so that they would understand the context of this. Although it's not described in the book because it comes in the second volume, when Trayvon Martin, the young boy who was killed by a vigilante, basically, who had decided that this was a suspicious character, and then that individual is let free. I described how I went to the White House briefing room and said, look, this could have been my son. And I was not in a position to determine guilt or innocence. Given my role, I needed to let the prosecution play out on its own. But I think people understood what it was that I was seeing. But the fact of the matter is that after 8 years of my presidency, we saw some people who were frightened by the prospect of me, African American, occupying the highest office in the land. But I'm always trying to remind people that there were a lot of people who were inspired by it and embraced it. And, the majority of the American people approved of the job that I did. And, I left office with as high approval ratings as any time during my presidency. So, Michelle and I often have this debate. She tends to be, she looks at a glass, she says it's half empty, and I tend to be the glass half full guy. I choose to believe that, although it's bumpy sometimes, we're making progress on this front.
Thank you very much, Flavia, for taking part in the conversation. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. Otherwise, I would talk about Black Orpheus, the movie that inspired your Anne Durham, your mother, to look at black men in a particular way. So that was a work from a Brazilian poet. So some Brazilians feel sort of responsible for your very existence.
Well, it's a beautiful and at the time groundbreaking film, and Brazilian culture, I think, has always had a special place in my life. Not just film, but music. Brazilian writers. So it is a lovely country. I can't wait to go back. And as soon as we get this pandemic under control, I hope I have a chance to visit once again.
Yeah, good. Thanks so much. And take good care of yourself and your girls, and send regards to Bo as well.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Sure. Bye.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
We appreciate
Thank you, Mr. President. My
Be
pleasure.
safe.
You too. Take care. Use your mask. Muito obrigado pela audiência. Uma Terra Prometida já está nas melhores casas do ramo. Até a próxima.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It was an excellent interview.
But we just have to stay a little bit apart.